Welcome into another edition of the James Boyd Podcast. I, of course, am James Boyd, joined by my editor, Jim Aiello. And Jim, summer break is here. Summer
You did it.
break is here. Oh,
I
it's
get to go back on
amazing.
vacation, right? I'm done. I'm off for another few months.
No. You got to stay. We need you. We need you in the office, pulling out the old schedule, figuring out what stories you're going to write. We got some fun stuff coming, I promise you on that, when from a story topic. But I did want to rejoin our listeners and thank you all for tuning in as always, and kind of to fill you all in on what we saw throughout the end of OTAs and this 3-day mini camp that was mandatory. So to recap really quick, OTAs was voluntary. Most of the players were there. Some notable ones were not, but everyone was there, according to Shane Steichen, for perfect attendance, namely Sauce Gardner, Jonathan Taylor. Those were two of the big name players that had been training and doing things on their own. So they were there, just wrapped up today. And I will actually start with the player who did not participate in OTAs or anything this spring when it came to minicamp practice, nothing. Alec Pierce. And Jim, to kind of give people the behind the scenes, I go in yesterday and I'm thinking, okay, I was told by Jim, write a story or else. Which
I say that to you almost every day.
right?
Yeah.
Which isn't exactly the truth, but basically he was like, "Hey, you only got to write really one story, kind of one catch-all story on what's going on at camp." But when Alec Pierce took the podium and he started talking about his ankle, his left ankle surgery, I kind of got a little bit more worried, and I called Jim after and said, "Hey, I need to write this today because this is more significant than I expected, and maybe the injury itself is lingering longer than I initially knew about." And so, to put some context in around that, Alec Pierce hadn't talked since he signed with the Colts to rejoin them after getting his massive deal. And then on top of that, he hadn't talked to us since he had undergone surgery. So we hadn't heard from the horse's mouth, no pun intended, about his ankle and what was going on. So he gave us, and this is the Cliff Notes version, we can dive more into it, Jim,
Yeah.
4 to 6 months. When I call you and you hear that and you see the video that I sent you of him limping throughout camp, how did you maybe react to it? And how should Colts fans feel about this? Because this, I'm getting worried. I'm
Okay.
ready to hit the panic button.
Yeah. So I did have that initial reaction, but then I was like, you know what? On the scale, like the panic meter for me, I think I'm only on like a 3 or a 4. And here's why.
Okay. Talk me off
And
the
I told,
ledge.
yeah, I think there were at least 3 or 4 teams, including the Colts, lined up ready to pay Alec Pierce in free agency. I think that they probably had a pretty good idea of where his injury was at, even if he didn't necessarily know all the details himself yet, because they said obviously this has kind of lingered a little bit further than he thought, and they had surgery. But still, I still think the nature of the injury, the overall injury, is something that the Colts and other teams weren't concerned enough about to not want to pay him over $100 million, right? So now that's maybe more of a long term outlook on things. Like he'll be good eventually because it's just an ankle, you know. In the short term, I think you could probably boost that panic meter button up a little bit to like a 5 or a 6, because the fact that he's not positive about training camp and then he's not like 100% about week one, like it sounds like that is still within the realm of like the realistic outcome is that he'll be ready for week one. However, if you're a Colts team that kind of needs to get off to a hot start, that kind of needs to really win really fast for this team and everything to go the direction that you want it to go, not having your highest paid wide receiver, the guy you essentially chose over Michael Pittman Jr., there for the start of things, while your quarterback is also recovering from a torn Achilles, like that starts to get a little scary. Is that if you're not healthy to start the season and you start slow, that can be a very, 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 very big problem for this team. So that is a little concerning. Again, especially because the receiver depth, and as you wrote about in your story today, like no offense to Ashton Doolin, but if Ashton Doolin has got a legit chance to win your wide receiver 3 battle, your depth isn't awesome. Like again, Doolin's fine. I'm not saying he's a bad player, but you don't have the depth they had a couple of years ago. I mean, Pittman's gone. A.D. Mitchell, who I know frustrated a lot of people, but was had talent. Like didn't not here anymore. So like the depth that they had, I think we talked about this supporting cast wise last year around this time. Like man, the receivers are pretty deep. They got a good group of guys. Like, and now Tyler Warren is here and that'll help. But I I do worry about if Pierce is not available, can Warren and Downs carry the load receiving wise, especially even if Pierce is ready, is he 100%? So long term, not that panic. Short term, I am a little concerned about what this might mean for the Colts.
Okay, I feel like I'm at the therapist's office and I'm laying on the couch venting all my problems because I was supposed to feel a little optimistic about Alec, and I'm already seeing some hurdles here. But I'll add, just for the sake of explaining it a little bit further, because I know this is a question that's come up a
Yeah.
lot throughout my reporting and social media, radio, wherever I see people. Why didn't he get the surgery done right after the season? Because ideally, if you get it done in January, you have a 6-month timeline, you're, and that's the furthest timeline, you'll be back by June, you're back by training camp, all is well, no big deal. And really, we're probably not even talking about it right now. But the issue with that is, and I'm glad Alec honestly offered more candor than most athletes would when it comes to injuries. He told us that he initially went to get a PRP injection right after the season ended to try to avoid surgery. A PRP injection it's short for platelet rich plasma injection. And that is supposed to make you feel good. 6 to 8 week recovery. Let's just call it 8 weeks, 2 months. So if you take him at his word and say, okay, he got this stuff done in January to February is 1 month, February to March is 2 months. And then he got the surgery on his ankle in late March. So sometimes I try to explain this to people and just reiterate that although we look at athletes as like these investments and these commodities, they're still people. And people, not just athletes, usually will get surgery as a last resort, not the first one. So you want to try to do whatever you can to avoid getting your skin cut open and getting operated on. And so he said he explored a bunch of different options, tried the PRP injection and didn't work. And then at that point, the doctors told him, well, you can play through this. And Alec revealed that this is something he's been kind of managing since 2024, which is kind of crazy to think about because he's led the league in yards per reception the last 2 years with a not 100% ankle. But he was saying they told him, hey, in the next 12 months, you got to get this done. You can play through the pain like you did last year. But he said it ramped up over the last month to really make him reconsider, like, man, do I want to just have basically, and not to quote Andrew Luck, but like this cycle of, injury, pain, rehab, and I'm still trying to play and to kind of get through it. If you remember what I think it was Andrew's shoulder way back when, like he spent the whole year kind of not getting the surgery, then he finally got it. Alec is getting it done now to avoid any long-term issues, which I respect, but that, again, just explains the timeline a little bit better. It wasn't like he was twiddling his thumbs saying, you know what, I got to wait till I get paid. We did ask about that. And he said he doesn't believe that really influenced anything when it came to his negotiations because teams were aware, from what I understand, of what he had going on. It wasn't like the Colts were blindsided by the need for surgery, but it's one of those things where you're having all this kind of happen, and no one doubts his commitment. And Alec, to his credit, when it comes to playing football games, has been durable. He's only missed 4 games in his first 4 years in the league, but he's stepping into such a big role, and those reps matter. And your quarterback, what if he isn't 100% himself? Can you all develop a little bit of chemistry if he's 85% of Daniel Jones instead of 100%? So those little nuances I do wonder about. I'm a little concerned about, but that's kind of where we're at with Alec. And again, I'm no doctor, no expert in the medical field, but all of us have eyes. And Jim, you saw the video I sent you. There's a clear limp, and we're in June. And so from limping clearly to running, jumping, and all of that, that to me is a little bit concerning. And then he also mentioned, hey, he's still not really doing much. He's running on an anti-gravity treadmill, Ultra G, but that's about it right now. So he can't even put like full weight on his ankle to run. And also the last thing I'll say is he didn't really clarify what the injury is. That was about the only thing he didn't tell us. He wouldn't tell us beyond just saying, hey, I had some discomfort. And then he kind of started looking around like, I probably need a doctor in here to explain the rest of it. And again, I appreciate him filling us in, filling the fan base in, so we're all informed of what's going on. But 4 to 6 months puts a lot of pressure on him. And honestly, I guess this makes a smooth transition to our next topic, Jim. If you'd have told me before the season started that Daniel Jones, of the 3 players, Daniel Jones, Alec Pierce, or DeForest Buckner dealing with the neck injury he's rehabbing from, that of those 3 guys, Daniel Jones, the guy coming off torn Achilles in December, will be the most likely to start in week 1. I would call you nuts if this happened, I don't know, even just 2 or 3 weeks ago. But this is where we're at. And to make it, I guess, a little more positive at this point in the podcast, I thought Daniel Jones looked really good. You've probably seen a lot of clips I've uploaded, what I've written about him. How do you feel about him still pushing? And did you chuckle at all at my lead of my story
Yeah.
about how he tried to play 11 on 11? He tried.
Whenever you can get Daniel Jones to show a little bit of his personality, because and again, not to say he doesn't have personality, but when you can ever get him to like seep out of him a little bit, when he's allowed to allows himself to have a little bit of fun, I enjoy it. So when I saw that in the lead of your story, I was like, oh, good, like he was being human again. That's great. So like as opposed to the robot that he prefers to be, in a good way, in a good way. No, I mean, again, I think I told you, like I'm in the believe it when I see it camp, and you're seeing it more. I'm not in India. I'm not
Yeah.
watching this stuff, but like I definitely the note that jumped out at me, which makes total sense, by the way. Not this is not an alarm or panic thing, but is when the play breaks down, Daniel Jones is told to effectively spike the ball and
Yeah.
end of play or
No
chuck
running. No
it.
running in the hallways, Mr. Daniel.
Exactly. So I know that he's not where he needs to be, obviously, and again, not that he's expected to be, but Daniel Jones' athleticism is a huge part of his game. It's a big part of what made him effective. Go back and read James and Ted and Wynn here at The Athletic did a really good story about what was making the Colts offense so effective, especially in that first half of the season. And
Movement.
yeah, Shane Steichen did a great job of taking advantage of both his athleticism and defense's anticipation of his athleticism, and in either using that against him or it's something that has to be part of his repertoire
Yep.
for him to be successful, in my opinion. So I'm still concerned. I still want to see him play a real football game, and I'm not sure when that's going to be the case. Like I don't know if that's going to be preseason. I don't know if that's going to be the regular season. But I get my point is only that until I see it, I'm not going to believe it, and it's not necessarily fair. But that's where I'm at with him because I just don't know that you can count on somebody to recover this quickly after an Achilles. And credit to him for being as far along in his rehab as he is. I mean, it's incredible. It really, truly is. But
Yeah, he's about 6 months out.
let me see it. That's all. So let me see it. That's all in a real game, and then I'll be ready to have those discussions, I guess.
So here's where I'm at with it. And I think that it's a very good educated guess. They're not going to play him in the preseason. I
Yeah,
just don't get that sense. Mainly because if they didn't have like joint practices or those opportunities, then maybe. But they do have a singular joint practice out in New England that I'll be going to later this year as we get closer to the season. And then they have two here in Indiana against the Atlanta Falcons. And so
yeah,
those will be three opportunities for him to see other defenses. And of course, they can't hit him and all of that.
right.
But I just think that it would be such a bad look if you were the Colts, you put him out there for a preseason game, and let's say he can get hurt in any game. Of course, that's football. But if he gets hurt in that game, it's like, well,
Yeah,
why is he out there? And also, I think maybe it's different if Daniel was kind of a new quarterback. You didn't really know what you had. Kind of like last year, where you know of him, but you haven't coached him in a real game yet, so he did play in the preseason. Whereas this year,
right.
he was the unquestioned starter. He's going to have a C on his chest and all of the above. And one thing that stood out to me beyond obviously the movement and the rehab and him sheepishly kind of smiling like, yeah, I did try to play, and they told me no. He is going to advance to 11 on 11 in training camp. They told us that. But just the work and the admiration he's earned from his teammates. I know you saw the quote in my story, Jim, but Quentin Nelson, who's a man of very few words.
Yeah,
I mean, you could ask him, hey, Quentin, it's your birthday today. How is it going? He'd tell you, yeah, I was born, however many years ago today, and just look at you and stare. Like, he was asked about working with Jared Farmer, the offensive guard out of Kentucky, and after practice, and he was like, well, we all work together. And that was it. I was like, dang, all right.
okay.
But when asking about his quarterback, the guy who, he's blocked for a slew of them throughout his career, this is what he had to say about Daniel Jones, which I thought was very fitting for a guy who was well respected, not only with the Colts, but even with the Giants. When things didn't go well, no one ever really trashed him because he worked so hard at his game. And here's Nelson saying he gets here early, he's here late, and he's doing things that matter to help him be at his best. You just really appreciate that in all facets of the game. He works endlessly to reach his whole potential, and that's just a guy you can really appreciate, especially at that position. He sets the example for the whole team because everyone's looking at him. And that idea has been put into practice, and every player pretty much says the same thing. And it's pretty organic. Like, I've talked to a couple different guys, and not like off the record where like, oh my God, I can't cite different people, but I remember last year talking to Jalen Jones, talking to Ashton Doolin, Laquan Treadwell, different guys, offense, defense, special teams, even. And they say that Daniel really is one of the guys, but he's also one of the guys who was there very early, very late, all ball. And it makes you, in a way, want to see him have just the opportunity to play. Like, I'll never root for a certain team that I cover because, hey, I'm undefeated as a writer. That's how I think about it, unless I miss deadline and Jim gets on me. But
Yeah.
as far as
I got a win-loss tally for you over here. So
exactly, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, we'll move on from that. But my point is, selfishly as a fan, as a reporter, and even as a competitor, I think everyone can appreciate a guy who is willing to put his body on the line and is trying to do everything he can to just play the game that he loves. So I can respect that. But again, it does come with some guardrails. So even when we get to camp, I'm curious to see, okay, he's in 11 on 11, but does he get every single rep? How far do they push it and things like that? And like I told you, I think that preseason games are just out of the question. Whereas, feel free to chime in, Jim.
No, I'm going to jump in here because if that's the case, like if he's not going to play in the preseason, it goes back to what we were talking about with Alec Pierce, where it is like, okay,
Ooh,
when's he
good
ready?
point.
When
Good
is he going
point.
to be shaken? Like, and if he's playing week one as his first game and he's shaking off rust, like I missed the schedule release, but I've seen it. It's not fun to start. It's not. I
Yeah,
mean, they
you
got.
got Baltimore at home. Then you go to Kansas City on the road Sunday Night Football. Then you
Yep,
got Houston, I think, week 3, and then you go
yep.
overseas to London to face the Washington. That's your first 4 games. And then you come back right after that. You didn't take your bye because that would have been a very early bye, and you're going to go on the road and face Pittsburgh.
That's exactly right. Those are the five. I'm glad you did it because
Oh,
on
trust me,
memory,
I'm
by the
locked
way.
in,
So
baby.
you're
I'm
locked
locked
in. I know
in.
you. Yeah, James just got his budget in for his travel, so he's got it all down. He knows what
That's,
hotel he's
that's
staying
exactly
in.
why,
Yeah.
yeah.
So my point is, if those aren't the teams to be shaken off rust against, like they're just not. Like they're
Right.
can you imagine like Daniil Hunter and Will Anderson in week
Whew,
3, and Daniel
that
Jones is still
defense.
like he's not feeling himself. Like the
Yeah.
Chiefs. It's not necessarily Chris Jones and George Karlaftis, who I know everybody in Indiana remembers and loves from Purdue. Like this is it's gonna be tough. Like it's gonna he's already facing a very tough road of getting back
Hmm.
and being himself. And then the fact that he's got I mean, I know the Ravens and Chiefs were both big disappointments last year, but two teams that I still think are going to be in the Super Bowl conversation. The Texans certainly in the Super Bowl conversation. They were last year. Like that's a brutal way to start. And if he's not going to play in the preseason and be able to shake off some rust there, and he's just going to have to go take like the first true like live, okay, like live ammo, I guess. But yeah, don't like
Yeah.
using that. But yeah, against those teams,
Live
again,
action. Yeah.
it's tough. Yeah, it's really tough. And I'll segue us into our one of our next topics is like if one of these people whose ears should be perking up with this is Malki Kawa. Like I know he's listening because I saw him tweet out that Jonathan Taylor was talking yesterday and he said he wants to be a Colt for life, and Malki Kawa was like, "Yep, I hope the Colts are listening too." Like, but he knows that Jonathan Taylor had a huge workload last year, and it might even have to have a bigger workload, especially early on in this season. And if I'm a good running back in the NFL, I don't enter a contract season without a new deal. Like I don't. He's only 27. Again, I know it's old for a running back. I get that, but like he's gonna get paid one more time. And if I'm him, I want to get paid and not put my body at risk. I'm not saying he's got to hold out, and this has to be the whole contentious thing
Don't
that we
speak
had
this
last
over me,
time.
Jim.
I'm not, but if I'm Jonathan Taylor, I want new money before I get back on the field. Honestly, like at least one more year guaranteed. I was talking to our friend Austin Mock here at the Athletic, who everybody knows he uses his projection model to do the season stuff, but he's been toying around with some contract stuff. I asked him real quick to spit out a number for me for Jonathan Taylor. He guessed a high number. I mean, he shouldn't say guessed. His model spit out a really high number. It was 19.8 million per year for 3 years, which would be right around what Saquon Barkley is at the top of the market currently. That is with the anticipation that Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs will go a little higher than that when they sign their new deals. But so he'll be around the fourth or fifth highest paid running back, which seems fair given what he's done. But it's gonna be a lot of money, and I am curious if the Colts are gonna want to give it to him because they're in this weird transitional phase, or could be in this weird transitional phase. Maybe they're in this weird like evaluation phase where we don't know if Chris Ballard has long-term security anymore, and if they're not good this year, if they're going to clean house, and would a new GM be happy that he has to inherit a 28-year-old running back on new money? I don't know, and I don't know if that's something that the Colts ownership is going to approve of. So it complicates the situation. But that said, like the Colts need and are going to have to rely on Jonathan Taylor this year, and if that's going to be the case, if you're his agent, you're asking for more new money right now. I would
Yeah,
be.
Jim, I had to laugh at JT's response, 'cause I did ask him. I was like, "Hey, by the way, what'd you learn from the first time you went through this that you might use a second time?" And I'm paraphrasing what JT said, but more or less, he fired back, "Well, the real Colts fans will know what's going on, not just, believe everything they read or see." And I'm like, "Nah, nah, nah. You don't get to say that. We were there every day. You didn't smile." And JT has beautiful teeth and beautiful smile, handsome guy. The man didn't smile for 2 months until he got paid. I was there
Hmm.
every day, basically charting which color hoodie he wore in 90-degree weather. So it got really contentious. I don't care about making stuff up. I didn't make anything up. We were there for all of it. Jim Irsay, God rest his soul, he was eccentric. He often gave quotes that were viral for many reasons. And one of those quotes that he gave during negotiations was, "If I die tonight and JT is out of the league, the National Football," he didn't even say National Football League, "the National Football rolls on." So, point being, we probably won't get to that level of back and forth with, subtweets and things on
Yeah.
Twitter and stuff like that. But any team, we were looking actually, we were just doing like some brief research in the Colts media room of trying to find like, okay, what's a running back within the last 10 years that's got three contracts from the same team, including the one they got drafted on.
Right.
Saquon didn't have that happen.
Nope.
Derrick Henry didn't have that happen. Christian McCaffrey didn't have that happen. And these are the three, four, and obviously Bijan and Jameer Gibbs. Like they're top of the market too. But I mean, like guys that are older, those three did not have that happen, if I'm not mistaken, with the teams that drafted them. So it's something to keep in mind going forward. And I know you also, if you want to chime in here, Jim, took a look at another player who's going to be a big factor when it comes to blocking for Daniel Jones and also blocking for Jonathan Taylor, and that is Quentin Nelson. He is going into his age 30 season with the Colts. He's
Yep.
been a Pro Bowler every year through his first 8 years. He's shown no signs of stopping. He's, I think, a six-time All Pro. He's probably, and I would have to ask Mike Chappell, the dean, shout out to the GOAT, hey, is he the greatest offensive lineman in team history? Because if he is
Ooh.
not, he is going on that pace as far as his accolades and his durability and just the high level of production he's provided. So when you look at his market, because he's also going into a contract year, Jim, and Quentin did the Quentin thing and said, "Hey, I'm just focused on being here. I'm all ball. Leave that up to my agent. It's out of my control." I didn't believe that either. It's not all the way out of your control. If Quentin Nelson says, "I want to get paid," and that becomes public, you can definitely have some leverage to say, "I deserve to get paid here or elsewhere." So, what are your thoughts on one, what Austin Mock and his model said about what he could get paid, and
Yep.
two, should they do it or can they do it?
First thing to address your question is get ready for another $100 million to go out the door, Colts fans, because that's what the model is at 25.3 million for 4 years. So that'll put you at a cool 100 million and would put him at the top of the guard market. Tyler Smith is at 24 million per year. And, I don't know if you I don't know if you want to pay a 30-year-old top of the market money, but I also don't know that you have a choice. Like Quentin Nelson, as you mentioned, is iconic at this point in the Colts history. He's only 30, so it's not like for a guard that's not that old. He can obviously deliver, I think, 4 more years of quality play. But it is risky. I mean, like if you look at the guys that are some of the guys that have signed these deals Tyler Smith was at 24 million, but he got age at signing, he was 24. Quentin got his deal at 25. So it's gonna be a bit of a question. Joe Tooney did get a decent sized deal when the Bears traded for him from the Bears. Or, I mean, traded from the Chiefs, I should say. Excuse me. But I don't think you have much of a choice. Jonathan Taylor, running backs, they don't age the best. The third contract, like you said, I mean, you could go down the line. I don't think Derrick Henry ended up getting a third deal before they let him
He
go.
didn't.
I think Ezekiel Elliott was let go before his third deal. So yeah, these things don't typically age that well, and most teams know that. And so I think you could see that happen with Jonathan Taylor, but with Quentin Nelson, he's just an
Do you think he's
institution.
GM proof?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
pay
that's
him
that's a
in.
good question. Yeah, I don't think any GM comes in and is mad that you got Quentin Nelson on a long-term deal. In fact, I think that might even be an asset. Like if you say we have Quentin Nelson, a true like locker room leader and a I was gonna say above average player, that'd be underselling him quite a bit. An all pro player locked up for the long term, somebody who can lead your offensive line. I don't think there's any GM in the world who wouldn't be appreciative of that. So that's one of those deals where I could see it happening. Other like you mentioned, guys like Jonathan Taylor, even guys like Josh Downs, who I think in a different team in a different situation might get a contract extension. might not hear just because of what you said about the uncertainty of handing out new money to guys that you don't know about for the future and who's going to be the GM and making decisions and all that stuff. But Quentin Nelson feels like he is the exception to that. It feels like he is such an institution with the Colts and still at the top of his game that it's probably going to be fine. So I could see that one. If you were asking me to like rank them, like what's the likelihood to get done, that would be number one on my list, just because he's Quentin Nelson.
That's kind of where I'm at when it comes to the contracts. But again, it's just all very interesting because you're looking at two of the best players in all of football. Jonathan Taylor, his career average for rushing yards in a game is 90.5. That's the fifth highest all time. And the four guys ahead of him are all Hall of Famers: Jim Brown, Barry Sanders, Terrell Davis, and Eric Dickerson. Then JT. Like that's the pace he's on. Now he needs, I think, realistically, probably 3, 4, maybe 5 more years of really good production to say, hey, if I can get to 10,000 yards, I'm a Hall of Famer, that sort of
Yeah,
thing. But Quentin Nelson, same deal, Hall of Fame level of talent. And you're just in a weird spot where they're both playing non-premium positions, and you got to decide, are we going to pay non-premium positions also with what some people might consider a lame duck GM who's going into the last year of his contract? This would all be a lot smoother if the GM knew he was going to be here next year as well. We don't know that yet. So very curious how that unfolds. But as we talk about contracts, there is one contract thing that I've come across, and I've talked to a lot of people about it on the Colts beat, and shout out to Stephen Holder, ESPN, Colts reporter, for bringing it to my attention. But as we go through, and I'll keep this brief, as far as the backup quarterback play goes throughout minicamp and OTAs, it wasn't great. I'll be honest with you all. Anthony Richardson, Riley Leonard, Shane Steichen says they're 50-50. With my own eyes, I didn't see much separation from either player. They both had their ups and downs. I would say that it was probably more down than up. Looking at that offense and the way it operated when Daniel Jones wasn't in, I was thinking to myself, boy, they need him to be healthy, and they need him to be healthy for all the games, because it was kind of erratic with both players where, Anthony's probably more athletic and physically gifted, but they both made some mistakes when it came to errant throws and maybe not seeing things as quick as they probably should. But that's just the nature of the beast when it comes to their position group. But that date that I was talking about and that kind of soft deadline when it comes to the contract, Anthony Richardson is due a $4.2 million roster bonus on the third day of training camp. We don't know when training camp officially starts just yet, but let's say it starts July 28th. Then he's due $4.2 million. And Jim, if he's on the roster by then and the Colts indeed pay him that 4.2, and let's say July 29th, a team comes in and says, I want Anthony Richardson, his price tag, because right now if you trade for him, it will cost about $5.3 million for a new team to take on that salary. But if that drops to, if you take away the roster bonus, which the Colts will pay, his salary will drop to $1.1 million. And then you could come in and trade for him. Now, the catch is he would have missed all of training camp, any offseason work, learning a new offense, and it will be like a 1-year flyer because he would be a unrestricted free agent the next year. But even then, that might be more enticing for a team to consider because it's so cheap. I mean, it's $1 million for a quarterback who started 15 games in this league and may be able to help you out in a pinch. I wouldn't make him your QB2, but hey, that wouldn't be a bad QB3, I guess. Or if a team gets desperate and say, you know what, our QB2 went down in camp, we need a body. We need somebody who can possibly play a game or two. Let's go get Anthony. So that's the deadline I'm looking at, Jim. And when I kind of spell it out for you like that, do you think that's like the realistic next chance that we could see any movement if something happens?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I wouldn't put it at 0% that somebody comes in before then, but like you said, at this point, you're it's kind of like the AJ Brown thing, where it's like, well, why not just wait till the money makes more sense for everybody involved? I mean, obviously the Colts aren't going to be happy to hand out that extra money, but I think teams know what that is, and they know the Colts want to get rid of him, so there's not exactly a bargaining position for the Colts to be in at this
Right.
point. So yeah, I think it's one of those things where you're probably right that if you're bringing him in, you're bringing him in as you probably want to bring him as your number 3 and
Yeah.
then hope that he can be the number 2. Like I was looking at, we talked a lot about like, yeah, obviously Minnesota came up a lot, like, but they have Kyler and JJ McCarthy. That seems like enough going on for them right now. The Rams obviously drafted Ty Simpson. That was another team that had kind of been discussed. So I was looking around at some teams that might make sense. I could see like a team like the 49ers doing it. They have Brock Purdy, they have Mac Jones, but Mac Jones was like kind of a hot trade commodity because he played so well last year. and his deal does expire after this season, I'm imagining Mac Jones would want to go somewhere else and try to start somewhere. Um, so maybe you get a guy like Anthony Richardson in the pipeline. He's your third string quarterback, and then you let Mac go. You bring Anthony Richardson back up, and let him. You sign him to a modest deal next year as your backup, and see what happens there. Like a guy like Kyle Shanahan, that does seem like a project he'd be willing to take on. Like I don't think Mac Jones and Brock Purdy are heavy lifts for him at this point anymore, probably. So maybe that is a project he'd want to take on. But anyway, we could speculate about trade partners all day. In the end of the day, yeah, I think at this point they're probably waiting for that. Um, and again, I still wouldn't rule out the possibility that, if no trade suitor comes, that they might just cut him loose and let him go find his own deal somewhere else. I think they're going to be hesitant to do that. I don't think that will happen. I think you're right. I think we talked about this last week that Chris Ballard he thinks there's still talent there. He's gonna want to hold on to him, and why give him up for nothing? You just make him your third string quarterback at worst. So, but yeah, I think that's the deadline. That's the day to identify as the potential, like, okay, here's when things could start ramping back up again, especially if he looks good in camp or has a good preseason game, and as you said,
Right.
or if there are injuries around the league where somebody needs a backup all of a sudden.
And to round out our episode of the James Boy Podcast, and thank you all for listening. Shout out to Ashton Dooling talking about backups. That's a backup who,
Yep.
unlike Anthony, is vying for more than just being number 2 on the depth chart. He's trying to be the third starting receiver among a group that's kind of crowded. If you think of you transition from Michael Pittman Jr. to what they have now, behind Alec Pierce and Josh Downs, it's wide open. And I have to give Ashton Dooling credit. He made some really good plays throughout OTAs and throughout mini camp that made you think, if they don't sign another receiver, which I know the Colts are still considering, could he be their wide receiver 3? And I know you weren't there, Jim, but reading what I've written and also just talking to you over the phone, you know how much I've been kind of hyping this dude up. He had a
Yeah.
crazy catch over Sauce Gardner in team drills the other day, went up and mossed him. He had a couple of nice, really short, intermediate red zone touchdown catches, nice grabs from Daniel Jones that happened, I want to say maybe last week in OTAs, but he continues to flash and show that he could be a potentially good player, realistic player for this group. So how do you feel about him being the guy, being the third guy? I know he does a lot on special teams. He even played defense last year. Is that enough?
I feel like if Ashton Dillon is your number 3, I'm very uncomfortable about where I'm at.
Ooh, okay.
I've watched him play a lot. I mean, I covered the Colts when he was there, and he was a great special teams player, and he's made appearances for them as a pass catcher, and done well. Like he can obviously he's fast. He can stretch the field. I'm of the belief that if you've been in the NFL since 2019 and you're almost 29 years old, that if you had it, you would have showed it. Like
yeah, you
one
are
of those
who
things.
you are. Yeah.
Yeah, this is not like baseball where sometimes you get these late breakouts. It's usually in the NFL, like you show it pretty early, and if you have it, you have it, and you don't, you don't. Again, I'm not trying to dump on Ashton Dillon. I think he's a good player. I think as a wide receiver 4, you're pretty happy. You're okay with that. That's not a bad thing for you to have. I just think he's underqualified as a wide receiver 3 would be the best way I would say. Now, I'm sure that people listening to this podcast have been doing a lot of reading and listening, and the league is leaning into a lot of 12 and 13 personnel, a lot of 2 tight end, 3 tight end sets. The Colts could certainly do more of that this year and not have to rely on having a third receiver out there as much. But yeah, I think he's capable. I just don't know if I'd feel comfortable with him as my wide receiver 3.
Fair enough. And so, as a parting gift,
Sorry.
you poo-poo, ran on my parade, and I'll make sure to relay the message to Ashton Doolan and say, hey, this guy Jim, you don't believe in you. But no, I'm with you on that. But one name as a parting gift for the listeners, and maybe we can get into this as we get deeper into the summer, different names, different players we could consider. But Keenan Allen, he's out there. He is old, but he knows Shane's offense.
Yeah.
He had, I think, over 80 catches last year. Over 700 yards, 4 touchdowns. Does he have enough left in the tank at 35, stage 35 season?
Let's get Phillip back here. Let's get Phillip back throwing a Keenan.
Yeah, I didn't say Phillip. Hey. You're trying to get me to work too much. But is that a possibility? We know that Shane will call that phone and say, hey, did you like playing with me? Yeah. You want to get paid? Come on. And so I just think that that's something to keep an eye on, perhaps monitor. And not just Keenan, but like Stephon Diggs is out there. Is there somebody they would consider bringing in as like that veteran wide receiver 3? So covered a lot of ground there in this episode of the podcast, and I appreciate you all for kind of sticking with us as we weed our way through it. We got some fun podcasts coming up, fun work coming up as well. But we hope you all are staying cool, enjoying the summer. The Colts are on summer break. We are kind of, but we'll try to keep you updated when it makes sense. So thank you all for listening to the James Boyd Podcast. You can get it wherever you find your podcast, and we will talk to you all very, very soon.